but he's in mommy's arms, so he's quite an easy baby. I wanted to, first of all, thank you all so much for the love and the support on all the last videos. Thank you for getting us to 1,000 subscribers, all the comments, the love, the everything. Just thank you from the bottom of our hearts. And I'm gonna make this video, it's just gonna be me because it's the birth story. It's a sit down video. It could be boring for you, but I love sit down videos about birth stories because I like to get into the nitty gritty of stuff. And I've really enjoyed other people's birth story videos. I like to know things before I go through them. And I had quite a different birth story than a lot of people because I actually was like 3 days in labor. And then I ended up having to have a C-section. So the story really begins when in my 20-week ultrasound, what happened was they saw that my umbilical cord, well, our umbilical cord, I guess, was attached to him, and they couldn't really see where it was attached to me. And so what that does is usually they only catch that at the end when you're giving birth and they get the placenta, but they caught it early on. So they spoke to me about it. They said, listen, your umbilical cord is not where it usually is in the norm. And what can happen when that happens is that the baby is smaller. Don't laugh yet. So he said, so that was one of my 8 doctors following my pregnancy. So these were his words exactly. He might be smaller, but it's a small chance. And plus, look at you. I don't expect you to pull out a 10-pound baby. So those are his words. So I'm at 20 weeks. Time goes by, they order another ultrasound at 28 weeks. So I go to my 28-week ultrasound. It's my 3rd one. I'm like, oh, you know, it's pretty cool. I get a 3rd ultrasound, more pictures. So they look, and he's really big. So I think at 28 weeks, he was, or no, it was 32. Excuse me, it was 32 weeks. So he was 5.5 pounds. When the nurse called me and looked at the results, she was like, holy crap, that's a big baby. And he was 95th percentile, which is huge because I am 5'2" and 103 pounds, 102 pounds since I'm basically 12. So I'm like 5th percentile in the human race, and he's like 95th percentile. So right then they're like, oh, you know, it's fine. A lot of times we're wrong about ultrasounds because it's speculation made by a machine after, you know, you measure bones and whatnot and the circumference of your head. So bear with me. It might be a long story. What happened was he was 95th percentile. So then they were kind of concerned about his rate of growth. They wanted to know how big he was going to be. So they ordered another ultrasound. So this is ultrasound number 4. So the one, the dating, the 20-week, the 32-week that I just did, and now 36. They wanted to know from point A to point B, so that being 1 month, so beginning of the month and end of the month, what his rate of growth would be. And that would give a better picture of how big he is. So at the 36-week ultrasound, he was still 92nd percentile, which is huge. So at 30, this is gonna get a lot of numbers, but so at 32, he was 5.5 pounds, which is a pretty big baby. Then at 36, he was 7.4 pounds, which is pretty big. And then they ordered, so then they sent me home, and I kept saying, you know, this is the last ultrasound, blah, blah, blah. Finally, not the last ultrasound, they called me for a 5th ultrasound at 40 weeks. They said, you know, we're gonna book it the day you turn your 40 weeks, and it's your due date, and then we'll go from there. So I did the 40-week ultrasound, and the number was 9.4 pounds. So I'm like, you know, yes, they do make mistakes, but this is the 5th, like it would have to be 5 mistakes in a row. Like I think we've established that it's a big baby. I was quite concerned about getting a C-section because I'm tiny, and like 9.5 pound babies are huge. So they obviously didn't want to induce because there's no medical reason to, and the cutoff for C-section is 10 pounds in hospitals. So what happened was I started getting really itchy at night, but I'm really not one to complain. And every time I get to the doctor, I like blank out. I'm like, nope, everything's fine, bye, you know? And it's Evan that was like, you know, you need to write down your symptoms and then you need to tell them and be honest. And then I had a feeling that I was really itchy to the point where I bought a stick to itch my feet. So I said that as I'm leaving, I said, you know what? I'm really itchy and my appetite decreased a little. Nobody noticed really, like except for Evan, because I do eat more than the average person. I eat literally like the same as Evan, which is crazy. But I've always been like that since I'm a kid. I eat, everybody says it, I eat crazy amounts of food. So I was never really asking or taking second plates or asking for food. I was just kind of eating my 3 meals a day, going through life. You know, I finish my plate no matter what, how hungry I am. I'm programmed to finish my plate since I'm a kid. So yeah, so then I told her that. So right away, she's like, stay here. I'm gonna get the nurse to come, you know, get blood and see, because, and I had read up on cholestasis of the liver. And so I read up on it and I said, it kind of sounds like cholestasis. And so she said right away, she got blood tests. By the time I got home, before I got home, she called me back, the doctor, and said, your enzymes are high. It's not critical, but they are getting high. So we're gonna induce you in the next 48 hours. Then that next morning I got the call, you're called in to be induced now. So being induced, I thought you just show up, they give you a couple IVs, boom, you go into labor, epidural, you pop a kid. It does not work like that. So they put a Foley catheter, which is like a big balloon, which they inject water inside your cervix. It does not feel good. They have to, there's a lot of exams, and so they did that. Very uncomfortable. I was contracting right away. I could barely walk, and I'm like really not one to complain. So I walked, whatever, it was fine. I'm in pain, but I did everything that day. They told me stay active if you want it to work more. So I took that to a whole new level. I washed the car, the outside of the car, the inside of the car. I went to the barn. I trained my horse. I brushed him. All day I took a walk with the dogs. I gardened. I took raspberry leaf tea. I ate pineapple. I ate spicy food. I had the bouncing ball that I sat on. I did everything, literally everything you could think of I did to accelerate. They told me if the Foley falls, it's a good sign. Come back to the hospital, it means you're dilated to like 3 centimeters because the Foley is 5 centimeters. So it fell out. I was really happy. And then I go to the hospital and I'm only 1 centimeter, which I don't even understand physically how something this wide could pass through a hole this big, but hey, that's what happened. So then they said, okay, we're gonna give you Cervidil, which is like just like a little insert that you put in with a hormone at the end, and it's a slow release hormone. And they can send you home when they give you that, because if ever you contract too much, you just pull it out and you're done. So they said, take this and go home. So then I go home for a second night. And I'm still, all right, battery died. So, where was I? So they gave me the Cervidil, and mind you, because of COVID, Evan was waiting in the car. He couldn't come in with me as long as I wasn't fully admitted to the hospital and in my room. So the night prior, he was in the car for like 3 hours, because once they give you something, they have to monitor you and the baby for 2 hours. So he was waiting in the car on Messenger. Then this second night, he was also waiting on Messenger. They sent me home again, so it was probably 11:30 at night by the time I got out. Then we go home. I have this thing called Cervidil, and it's making me contract, but every time I went to bed, everything would just stop. So wasn't anything crazy. I was contracting, but you know, I was kind of like, oh, is this a contraction? And they would tell me yes. So it was contractions, but it felt like basically, I don't know, maybe like an upset stomach of like 2 seconds. Like it was barely anything. I think I was dilated when I went back to the hospital after a full 24 hours of Cervidil. So we're going on to like almost day 3 of labor. And so I was probably 3 centimeters at that point. And they saw that the Foley and the Cervidil didn't work. The next step was to give me meds through oral meds. So it's like a little pill. I think it's called misoprol or anyway, something like that. They need to keep you in when they give you that, because unlike the Cervidil, you can't take it out once it's in your system. The only way is to, if you're contracting too much, is to give you meds to stop contracting. So they admitted us, finally, and Evan came in. So this is like the 3rd night that we go to the hospital. Evan comes in, finally. He's super excited. We get our room. They give me the meds. So they have to give it to me every 4 hours. And everything's fine. Finally, after 3 doses, so they give it to you like at 2 a.m., at 6 a.m. After 3 doses, I was dilated to, I think, 5 or something. My body just took over and I was in full out labor, and it was great. Like, I was taking baths, I was eating snacks. Like, we had a full snack drawer that we brought. I had my comfy PJs. It was really fun. It was like a hotel stay with Evan. So after the 3rd dose, they didn't give me the 4th because they thought everything was going fine and, everything was going like it should with my body in labor. He was placed properly. Everything was fine. Then at one point I go to eat lunch and I had Evan's pants on. Poor pants. And then I'm like, oh, you know what? Something's happening. And then boom, my water breaks, which is a good sign again, because my body was doing what it had to do and it was in labor. So my water broke and I was in pain, but I was walking around, I was eating my lunch, just being nonchalant. I took another bath. There's jets and everything, so it was quite great. It was really not that bad, the labor. And then at one point something snapped, like it felt like I cracked a bone. And then boom, like Evan always says, boom. The pain went from like a 2 to an 8, I would say, in one shot. And that was really where I had no breaks between contractions. So it was just like one big contraction. So there was no, a contraction is like a bell curve. So if you, like, I love bell curves, and you can just expect that it goes up and it goes back down and you just get through it. That's how I saw it. But when this happened, it was like one contraction and then no going back down, which is demoralizing because you never know when you're gonna feel better. And I think that's where, like, mentally it's just so difficult. So, and I had been 3 days now in labor, so I said, you know what, I can't do another full day, like, because I asked her, how long do you think it could take? And it could take another 12 hours. And I said, listen, like, I can't do another 12 hours. Like, I was okay for 72 hours, but now this is getting a lot. So I was like, can I please have the epidural? Mind you, I didn't have a birth plan. I went into this saying, I want a healthy baby and I want to be healthy. I have no birth plan. I will follow what I think my body needs and what my doctors recommend. So I think that's the best policy. I did have in back of my head to have the epidural, not knowing what the pain would be, but also because my mom didn't get the epidural, and when she needed an emergency C-section, because she didn't have that set up already in her back, she was put under general anesthesia, which is really rough on the body, and you miss the whole birth of your child, right? So I didn't want that to happen, but I said, I'm going in with no plan. Finally, I said, can I please have the epidural? I was like screaming at that point. I'm like, please give me the epidural guy. Please give me the epidural guy. He comes in, super chill guy, My water is still like going crazy, flowing everywhere. They are mops, the whole thing. Like, it was like the movies. They say sometimes your water doesn't break. Mine broke like the movies. Floodgates opened, water slides, whatever you want to call it, river. They needed mops and mops. So he came in, and then I was like, that was one of my biggest fears was, that big ass needle that goes, excuse my French, but that big needle that goes in your back. And he was like, don't worry about it. He's like, it's the most painless thing you'll live through in your life. And he was right, by the way. The feeling is basically when you get the first needle that goes in is like a regular size needle. and it feels like when you get frozen at the dentist. Same feeling, but in your back. A little bit of a sting, cold, that's it. That freezes you. Then they go in with the big ass needle, which you don't see, that you don't feel at all, 0. So I don't know if it's because I was in too much pain, but I didn't feel that at all. And then you feel about 3 more contractions, but they get shorter, but you still feel them full pain. So you're like, but then they get shorter, so it gets kind of better. He says you'll feel a couple contractions get shorter, and then, you know, you won't feel a contraction, and then it'll just get numb, but you can still move your legs, which I didn't know, by the way. You can still move your legs and move around with an epidural, which is great. So then then I was like, wow, this is great. I mean, I had, you know, 5 contractions now. I didn't feel a thing. Like, this is going to be easy. So finally, I kept contracting. I went up to 8 centimeters. It took a while, but I went up to 8 centimeters. I used the peanut ball to help dilate my cervix equally because he was on one side. I did everything they asked. I stayed, you know, active as much as possible. I had the peanut ball between my legs the entire time. I did a position to help him go down with gravity, like on my 4s. I tried literally everything. 8 centimeters, that's when they said, okay, you've been 8 centimeters for 2 hours. There's been no change. We're going to leave you X number of time. If you have not changed anything in another 2 hours, we may have to look into a C-section. So, but it wasn't certain. And in my head, I had been progressing. So why, you know, I'm contracting. Then they gave me the last, you know, hope, the last drug of hope. They gave me oxytocin, right? Yeah. Pitocin, it's called. So they gave me that. Then that's through IV. I started contracting way too much. So the baby's heart rate was racing. And so they started watching me closely. They called another doctor. So they were 2 doctors and like 5 nurses. They started monitoring me. And then I said, oh, I feel like I'm getting a fever. And so they were monitoring my temperature every 30 minutes. And at first they were like, oh, you know, you're getting warmer, but it's not fever. And then finally they're like, yep, you have fever. So my water had been broken or open for over 12 hours, which is crazy when you think about it. But because of all the exams I had, every, you know, finger and every machine or whatnot that they put, I guess a bacteria got in there and I was starting to do an infection. So then they put me on an IV of antibiotics. So I started that. It was 2 pouches. Made me feel better. I was still shaking the entire time. And then what happened was I was contracting too much, so they gave me a special medicine under my tongue, which made me relax my contractions. And then finally, the last time, it was 2 in the morning by now. And I think I was pushing on my 4th day of labor. To be honest, I think I was in labor 4 days, which is a lot of work on your body. But I was still like, you know, I'm positive, I'm fine, everything's good. I tried to stay calm. I stayed calm from A to Z the entire time. And then finally she came in and she said, I'm going to check you for one last time. And then finally she checked me and I was still 8 centimeters and it was time for the baby to come out because now the heartbeat was irregular and everything. And he wanted to come out. He was right there. So they also did, they punctured his little head with a needle. That's when they told me he had hair because they wanted to see how much oxygen was in his blood to make sure he was okay. So they went inside and poked him with a needle to check the oxygen in his blood. Poor little guy, he wasn't even alive yet and he got a needle in his head. And finally, so at 2 in the morning she came. She said, you haven't dilated. I'm sorry, Samantha, but I'm gonna call for an emergency C-section. He needs to come out. She showed up with the liability papers, telling me all the percentages. I told her, tell me the stats. I love stats. So she told me all the stats about, you know, what can happen, what this and the everything. She called back her the epidural guy, and plus he had said, maybe see you later. So he turned out to be her husband, which is amazing. So she called him back. He was home sleeping. She was like, you know, come back. We have an emergency C-section. Very small town hospital, which is what I wanted. And so they all met me in the OR. Evan had to change into scrubs. It was very surreal. He had to pack up our bags because we had to go in the C-section room for recovery. So he packed up all the bags. They gave him scrubs. He had to go change. I was signing liability papers when I'm like half frozen, trying to stay calm. And then I kind of felt like a failure for like 2.2 seconds, I'm not gonna lie, because like I had worked so hard and you know, I had done everything to go into labor. Like I literally did everything in the books, whether it's the natural things, the doctor things, the drugs, like I did every single step of labor. I waited and I freaking pushed through those contractions, and I was like harder, like come on, like let's go, you know? My mindset was there. Anyways, so I felt like a failure for a couple minutes, but then I was like, you know what, like it's fine, it's not a failure. A lot of people get C-sections, it's life, you know, we're lucky to have medicine and to be able to do those things. And then finally I get down to the OR. I was saying jokes the entire time. I guess that's my way of, my coping mechanism is to say jokes when I'm in an awkward position or a position of stress. I will, and my friend Miranda, who I'm going to give a shout out to, is the same way. She has been through thick and thin with hospitals. She has been through a hell of a journey. I'm not going to I'm not going to talk about it here because it's not my place. But she has been through a hell of a journey, and she just made these dark jokes this entire time, you know. She joked about everything, and that's kind of, and she's been my friend since we're 5, and I've kind of been like that too. Like I'll make jokes in times where I'm in a stressful position or I'm in an awkward position. So I was making jokes the entire time, and Evan was like, can you stop and just breathe, please? So I was like, the jokes. I was like, oh, like, I'm sorry, I brought your family back together, you know? And then they were laughing. They're like, yeah, it's a family affair. He's giving me drugs, and then she's cutting me open. And then the drugs weren't working at first, so I was like, I felt you with the needle, so you need to change something. And then I was like, I'm so small, how do you have a hard time drugging me? You know, and then he's saying, oh, small people are the most complicated people to drug. So a lot of jokes like that were happening. I was kind of like, oh, how does my belly, how do my insides look? What else was I saying? I was saying, oh, while you're there, can you clip my abs back together? Which she did. I don't know if that's standard, but she did put a clip back together. So let's see how that turns out. So I was just making jokes the whole time. I was shaking, like exorcist shaking, to the point where like Evan couldn't look at me. Like it was really bad. Like I couldn't even stay on the thing. Like I was shaking like this. So they had to give me warming blankets, but that's in the recovery room. So they did it. C-sections don't hurt, but you do feel pressure. So you feel people basically pushing on you, but they don't hurt. You're frozen. I was asking the doctor to like squeeze me to feel more like coddled, I guess. And then they just put your insides back together, and they were talking to me the whole time. They took me to recovery. I think it was like an hour and a half, 2 hours that I had to recover. That was the hardest thing, is like I saw my baby, but then he left with Evan, and I told him, and I said, go with the baby, don't stay with me. You know, like I'm fine. I'll just be here pulling jokes with my doctors. And so they brought me to the recovery room, and mind you, I did not cross one person my entire stay at the hospital, which was like 5 days or 4 days. Like in total, I didn't cross anybody. I think it was like more 4 days. But yeah, so small town hospital, great. There was nobody in the maternity ward at all. We were by ourselves. And so recovery room, I was shaking so much. I couldn't even drink water. I couldn't hold water. My doctor came and tried to give me water, and it went all over because I was literally shaking. I couldn't control my body, and my body was like spasms, and it hurt because it's like I was forcing all the time. It was so tiring. I was like, when is this gonna stop? And he's like, oh, it's normal. It's your hormones, your stress level. You just gave birth, plus it's the meds. Altogether, your body's kind of in a shock, but it's totally normal. So we were all still joking around. And I could use my legs right away. Like I could move them, which they were like, oh, great, you know, I could move them. And so finally 2 hours pass and they bring me upstairs. This is after like several nurses came to see me and chatted about, you know, where they live and their family and, you know, stuff like that, their jobs. So that was fun. They brought me up finally to see my baby, and that's what I did. I just took him in my arms. I was so damn happy to see Evan, and Evan apparently was like asking where I was and how I was doing, and I was doing the same. I was like, how's my baby? How's my baby? And when she took him out, she was like, oh, this is a big baby. And I was like, how big? How big? And I didn't know because they weighed him upstairs and I was downstairs. I was like, how big was this baby coming out of me? Because I did gain more weight than what is prescribed as healthy, which is 25 to 35 pounds for somebody that's like me, that's tiny. And I gained 43 pounds, and I eat so healthy that it was like, it was bound to be, there was a reason why I had gained so much weight. So finally, it's because they weighed him and he was 9.5 pounds. So this is a newborn shirt, well, a onesie, and it's already short on him. So yeah, he's in 3-month clothing basically already. And the nurses couldn't believe it, because at first the nurses were like, no, you don't have a 9.5 pound baby, honey. Like, don't worry, they're always wrong by a pound or two. They weren't. And they said, holy crap. They were all making bets. And they were like, wow, Samantha had no chance. Like, his head was 36.5 centimeters of circumference. And they were like, it physically didn't work with my bone structure. So yeah, that's what happened. It was quite an intense journey. I think it was worth every damn second. I was ready to go to war, to be honest with you. I looked at this as a challenge. I'm so glad everything happened the way that it did. I'm glad I had an amazing team of doctors. We weren't really allowed to film, and they let us film. We told them, you know, we really want to film the most we can. We don't want to see any blood. We don't want to see the operation. We just want, you know, a keepsake video that we can share and keep forever. So they understood that. They let us film quite a bit of things. And I was just so grateful. I would have another baby at that hospital in a heartbeat. Loved every single person that was there. Was so nice. And it was honestly like a hell of a ride, and I loved it. I would do it again a million times. I wouldn't change a thing. There's a silver lining to everything. Yes, C-section recovery is very different. Like, your belly stays big for a longer time because it's not naturally going down and it's more inflamed and whatnot. So there's certain things I didn't have to deal with down there that other people have to deal with, you know, giving birth like that. And then there's the part where, like, for me, it was hard just to get out of bed and to get up from a chair, and I can't lift my own baby. I can't, you know, I can't drive. I can't go anywhere with him. I can't lift the baby seat with him in it. A lot of things that I can't do, and that's fine. And the silver lining in all this is that we had an appointment Monday morning that I didn't want Evan to miss, no matter what. I wanted him to see the birth and then go, you know, goes to his appointment, because that appointment was very important to us. So he did, and what I did is I asked the nurses if I could exchange my one person, given that I can't lift the baby, I can't get out of bed, I can't do all those things, and I need help, that if we could switch the person, even though that was not allowed. They told me that it was allowed for me because of all the circumstances, nobody being there, nobody in the maternity ward, I can't get out of bed until 48 hours after. I can't lift, you know, all those things. So they let my mom come for the day. So my first day as a mom was spent with my mom. So she got to meet him. She got to meet him in the hospital. She didn't meet him when we got home that time with Alessio. She met him at the hospital on his first day of life and my first day of being a mom. She got to be there all day. And we really had nothing else to do. Like, it's very rare that I have nothing to do. But we were in a room. I couldn't get out of bed. She brought me Tim Hortons, which is the best thing you can bring a pregnant, or not pregnant, but delivering woman. And we got to spend the day together just chilling, talking, you know, feeding my baby, and just, that's it. It was great quality time. So that's how she met Hendrix and she became a Nana. She got to visit, which I know a lot of women did not get to get during the pandemic. I am so grateful that I got to spend that time with her and that she got to come to the hospital. Nobody is allowed to have any visitors at the hospital. And I got to have that. So that's a really good silver lining, and I'm so happy I got to do it. I think she was really happy too. So she got some nice pictures with him and some quality time, and that's it. That's my birth story. 9.5 pounds. So I'm like 5th percentile of the population and he's 95th percentile. And that is how I met my 9.5 pound baby who sleeps like a rock. So this was much easier to do than I anticipated, because he just slept through the whole thing. And I guess that's the perk of having a big baby, is that they drink more and they can sleep longer. If you have any questions about details, or if you're worried about something about your birth or your birth and labor, whatever, if you're worried about anything, I could tell you, like, take it on as a challenge. You know, expect the worst and pray for the best. Hope, yeah, that's what it is. Expect the worst, pray for the best. Hi, Cabell. If you're worried about anything, like, it's very painful. There are, you know, ways, and don't judge yourself for getting the epidural. Don't judge yourself for needing a C-section. Just go with it, and every story is a good story. Every birth is a good birth, and, you know, you're a mom regardless, and it's not a failure to get a C-section. Stop licking him. You can't lick him. No, 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 no. And yeah, so thank you so much for watching. I hope that you stuck along the whole way. If you didn't, it's fine. I know it's a long video, but I know a lot of people like to know the nitty-gritty of things and really what happened. And I think it's really important to share these stories, because not every birth is the same, and everybody's story is just as valid and important, and the truth, the internet needs more of the truth. And my birth story is not perfect. I didn't pop a kid like a little football and, you know, get to the hospital and, you know, 6 hours later it was really complicated and it wasn't the best, and I got an infection and I got this, and we had, you know, different things that happen, and it just, that's life. You just got to keep going, and that's what I did. You keep pushing through, and one step at a time. So I will not keep you any longer. Thank you so much for listening to this, and if you didn't, it's really okay. Thank you for getting us to 1,000 subscribers. Thank you for hitting like and commenting if you have anything. I will be answering questions in a future video, because this is way too long already, and I got so many questions in the last videos that I need to answer. So I will find room, maybe in my week 2 series of, you know, having a newborn, I will find room and I will answer your questions. So if you want to add to those questions, comment down below and ask more questions, and I will answer these as soon as possible. Thank you so much. Have a great day.